Oh, good. So set. Aloha, dear friends. God is most glorious. Welcome to the Sunday morning devotional program sponsored by the Spiritual Assemblies of Baha'is of South DeKalb and Sandy Springs, Georgia. So wonderful to have you with us today. Across the globe, the teachings of Baha'u'llah brought to us more than 150 years ago. Baha'u'llah is the founder of the Baha'i faith and whose name in Arabic means the glory of God. His teachings have inspired and continue to inspire individuals and communities as they strive to improve their own lives and contribute to the advancement of civilization. Baha'i beliefs address such essential themes as the oneness of God and religion, the oneness of humanity and freedom from all forms of prejudice, the inherent nobility of the human being, the progressive revelation of religious truth, which is a gradual unfolding of God's purpose with the appearance of each divine teacher, the development of spiritual qualities, which allows us to reflect the image God made us in, the integration of worship and service, with work performed in the spirit of service accounted as worship in the eyes of God. The fundamental equality of the sexes more widely evidenced in a setting of equal opportunity. The harmony between religion and science as an established fact. The centrality of justice in all human endeavor. The importance of education, particularly for children, and the dynamics of the relationships that strive to bind together individuals, communities, and institutions as humanity advances towards its collective maturity. Friends, we've been having amazing programs every week, and today we want to maintain that tradition. We're pleased to have you all with us. Again, welcome. We'll begin with our opening devotions. So please mute yourselves if you're not speaking and silence any electronic devices if you are. Thank you. Kathy? Bear with us, friends.
I beg of thee to forgive me, O my Lord, for every mention but the mention of thee, and for every praise but the praise of thee, and for every delight but delight in thy nearness, and for every pleasure but the pleasure of communion with thee, and for every joy but the joy of thy love and of thy good pleasure, and for all things pertaining unto me, which bear no relationship unto thee. O thou who art the Lord of Lords, he who provideth the means and unlocketh the doors. The Bab.
Elizabeth?
O Lord, unto thee I repair for refuge, and toward all thy signs I set my heart. O Lord, whether traveling or at home, and in my occupation or in my work, I place my whole trust in thee. Grant me then thy sufficing help, so as to make me independent of all things, O thou who art unsurpassed in thy mercy. Bestow upon me my portion, O Lord, as thou pleasest, and cause me to be satisfied with whatsoever thou hast ordained for me. Thine is the absolute authority to command. Beloved.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yasmin?
My God, whom I worship and adore, I bear witness unto thy unity and thy oneness, and acknowledge thy gifts, both in the past and in the present. Thou art the all-bountiful, the overflowing showers, of whose mercies have rained down upon high and low alike, and the splendors of whose grace have been shed over both the obedient and the rebellious. O God of mercy, before whose door the quintessence of mercy had bowed down, and round the sanctuary of whose cause loving kindness in its inmost spirit had circled, we beseech thee, entreating thine ancient grace, and seeking thy present favor, that thou mayest have mercy upon all who are the manifestation of the world of being, and deny them not the outpourings of thy grace in thy days. All are but poor and needy, and thou verily art the all-possessing, the all-subduing, the all-powerful Baha'u'llah.
Thank you, Yasmin. Jessica?
Glorified art thou, O Lord my God. I implore thee by the onrushing winds of thy grace, and by them who are the daysprings of thy purpose and the dawning places of thine inspiration, to send down upon me and upon all that have sought thy face, that which beseemeth thy generosity and bountiful grace, and is worthy of thy bestowals and favors. Poor and desolate I am, O my Lord. Immerse me in the ocean of thy wealth. Athirst, suffer me to drink from the living waters of thy loving kindness. I beseech thee by thine own self and by him whom thou hast appointed as the manifestation of thine own being, and thy discriminating word unto all that are in heaven and on earth, to gather together thy servants beneath the shade of the tree of thy gracious providence. Help them then to partake of its fruits, to incline their ears to the rustling of its leaves, and to the sweetness of the voice of the bird that chanteth upon its branches. Thou art verily the help in peril, the inaccessible, the almighty, the most bountiful.
Thank you, Jessica. Barbara Taylor? I think she may still be away. Kathy, could you please read this one?
O God, dispel all those elements which are the cause of discord, and prepare for us all those things which are the cause of unity and accord. O God, descend upon us heavenly fragrance, and change this gathering into a gathering of heaven. Grant to us every benefit and every food. Prepare for us the food of love. Give us the food of knowledge. Bestow upon us the food of heavenly illumination. Abdul Baha.
Thank you, Kathy. Elizabeth?
All men have proceeded from God, and unto him shall all return. All shall appear before him for judgment. He is the Lord of the day of resurrection, of regeneration, and of reckoning. And his revealed word is the balance. True death is realized when a person dieth to himself at the time of his revelation, in such wise that he seeketh not except him. True resurrection from the sepulchre means to be quickened in conformity with his will through the power of his utterance. Paradise is attained of his good pleasure, and everlasting hellfire his judgment through justice. The day he revealeth himself is resurrection day, which shall last as long as he ordaineth. Everything belongeth unto him, and is fashioned by him. All besides him are his creatures. Above.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yasmin?
Know thou, moreover, that thy letter reach our presence, and we perceive and peruse its contents. We noted the question thou hast asked, and will readily answer thee. It behoveth everyone in this day to ask God that which he desireth, and thy Lord will heed his petition with wondrous and undeniable verses. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you, Yasmin. Jessica?
The great being saith, O ye children of men, the fundamental purpose animating the faith of God and his religion is to safeguard the interests and promote the unity of the human race, and to foster the spirit of love and fellowship amongst men. Suffer it not to become a source of dissension and discord, of hate and enmity. This is the straight path, the fixed and immovable foundation. Whatsoever is raised on this foundation, the changes and chances of the world can never impair its strength, nor will the revolution of countless centuries undermine its structure. Our hope is that the world's religious leaders and the rulers thereof will unitedly arise for the reformation of this age and the rehabilitation of its fortunes. Let them, after meditating on its needs, take counsel together, and through anxious and full deliberation, administer to a diseased and sorely afflicted world the remedy it requireth.
Thank you, Jessica. Kathy?
The whole human race is submerged in the sea of the mercy of the Lord, and we are all the sheep of the one divine shepherd. Whatever shortcomings exist amongst us must be remedied. For example, those who are ignorant must be educated so that they may become wise. The sick must be treated until they recover. Those who are immature must be trained in order to reach maturity. Those asleep must be awakened. All this must be accomplished through love and not through hatred and hostility. Abdul Baha.
Thank you, Kathy. Friends, it's time for the healing prayer. We will just have a recitation of the prayer this morning. Thy name is my healing, O my God, and remembrance of thee is my remedy. Nearness to thee is my hope. and love for thee is my companion. Thy mercy to me is my healing and my succor in both this world and the world to come. Thou verily art the all-bountiful, the all-knowing, the all-wise. Baha'u'llah. Barbara, do you have a musical video presentation? The answer is yes.
Blessed is the spot and the house and the place and the city and the heart and the mountain and the refuge and the cave and the valley and the land and the sea and the island and the meadow. Blessed, 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 blessed. Blessed is the spot and the house and the place and the city and the heart and the mountain and the refuge in the cave and the valley and the land and the sea and the island and the meadow. Blessed is the spot, blessed is the spot, blessed is the spot, blessed. When mention of God hath been made and his praise glorified, when mention of God hath been made and his praise glorified. Blessed is the spot and the house and the place and the city and the heart and the mountain and the refuge and the cave and the valley and the land and the sea and the island and the spot. Blessed is the spot. Blessed is the spot. Blessed, 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 blessed.
Thank you, Barbara, for that beautifully inspired version of Blessed is the Spot, a prayer revealed by by Baha'u'llah. Thank you. Friends, you know, every week we are blessed and full of bounty because we get to have a speaker come and share with us special insights that they might have on a particular topic. And this week, we are pleased to have back with us once again, Iraj Horadust, Roger, as he likes to be called now, who has given presentations to this community on various topics. Born in Iran during World War II, he came to the US when he was 19 to continue his education. His graduate degrees are in accounting, industrial management, with a doctorate in public administration from the University of Georgia. He was a professor at Clemson University until he retired. While he was there, though, he initiated and facilitated a monthly seminar called Globalism, where students and faculty from all disciplines were invited to participate in discussions on major global issues and impediments to world peace, which led to continued discussions along Baha'u'llah's vision and mission for a better world. We're pleased to have him share with us today. So friends, please welcome Iraj Roger. His topic this morning is most fittingly from last week, which is when he would have been speaking, a glimpse into the lives of our 8 female hands of the cause. Friends, please welcome Roger.
Good morning. Allah Akbar.
Allahu Akbar.
How is everyone? I'm glad to be here again. So Hermione, am I able to share the screen?
Yes, if you
Okay.
share.
Okay. I just have one page. I want to put it up and talk about it together with you friends. Here we go, I think. All right. Let me bring it up to the top of the page. Well, yeah, I'd like to say a few words about our female hands of the cause. You may know that in the Baha'i faith, the founders, that is Baha'u'llah, then the authorized interpreter of the Baha'i writings, Abdul Baha, after he passed away, and then Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the Baha'i faith, after Abdul Baha passed away, appointed some very special people that they call them hands of the cause. They were basically their assistants in carrying out the duties of protecting the faith and also promoting and propagating the faith of Baha'u'llah. Now, in condensed summary, 4 of these hands of the cause were appointed by Baha'u'llah. 4 were named as hands of the cause by Abdul Baha. And 42 of the 50, as faith was advancing and there were more and more Baha'is, 42 were appointed by Shoghi Effendi. And from these 42, 10 10 of them were appointed right after the passing. Shoghi Effendi considered them as hands of the cause and said that they were hands of the cause, even though he had not officially assigned them during the lifetime, but many of them he gave them specific duties and things that they did for the faith based on the instruction of Shoghi Effendi as well. Now, it is interesting from these 42, 8 of them were women. And where do you think these 8 women were from? All 8 of them from North America. What an amazing privilege. What amazing blessing for the people of America, North America, and particularly for the people of USA. So from these 8 hand of the cause, who are all from North America, 6 of them were appointed from USA. So 6 of them, now, because people could be from this country or that country, but they may be appointed in another part of the globe. So 6 of them were appointed by Shoghi Effendi from North America, from USA, 6 of these 8 from USA. And 2 of them were appointed after the passing, and 4 of these 6 that I'll be talking about were appointed during the lifetime. What is interesting, I don't know whether this was by design or it just so happened, that there were 6 male hand of the cause from USA and 6 female hand of the cause from USA. I found that interesting as well. I talked briefly about the subject of America and the Most Great Peace based on the writings of Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha, and Shoghi Effendi. And although we have a lot of problems, we continue to have a lot of problems in this country, but there's a lot of blessings and a lot of promises for America, including the fact that ultimately the world peace will begin from this land. So what a blessing, what an opportunity, what a privilege for us Baha'is to more diligently work on this path of bringing this thought, this dream of previous manifestations of God to reality during this time, this blessed time. So without further ado, let me talk briefly about these 6 hands of the cause. So maybe less than 5 minutes on each one of them so that we can cover it within the span of 40 minutes. First one, her name was Keith Random Keller, born in 1876 and passed away during the time of Shoghi Effendi in 1933. She was one of those who was appointed hand of the cause after her passing on October 23rd, 1933. She was born in Kentucky. She had the privilege of meeting Abdul Baha in Paris in 1911. But a little different from other people who met hand of the cause and declared, she waited 10 years in her search and investigation until she declared in 1921, shortly before Abdul Baha passed away. So in 1921, she declared her faith in Baha'u'llah. She was a very educated lady. She had a master's degree. She was a head of the Department of English Studies in a college. She was versed in philosophy, literature, and religions. And then, particularly after she declared, she traveled extensively through Americas, Asia, and Australia, and went on pilgrimage twice. And then, based on the instructions of Shoghi Effendi, she settled in Iran to help the cause and see if because she was an American woman at that time, to put some sense in the heads of the rulers and people in Iran to reduce the pain of suffering and discrimination and all those kind of horrific things that were happening to the Baha'is of Iran. She worked and worked for a few years that she was there, and she was given promises by this governor, that the prime minister, this guy, that guy, that okay, we'll do this, we'll do that, and all that, but most of them were lies. And based on what they told them, she would communicate to Shoghi Effendi that I think we accomplished something. I think this happened. But next day she would know that no, it didn't happen. That they were just lying. They were just trying to appease her and send her away, and they were not doing what they were said that they would be doing. Whether it was freeing some prisoners or not persecuting some Baha'is or letting them go to school, or letting them keep their jobs or this and that, anything. Anyway, after a lot of suffering in those few years that she was in Iran, she passed away in Isfahan, which is a beautiful city in the center of Iran. In many ways, she passed away. She was still not too old. She was still fairly young. How old would she have been? She was in her 50s. She was in her 50s and she passed away. And primarily because of the suffering that she went through because of the lies and continuous lies of officials in Iran. So Shoghi Effendi considered her as a martyr. So we consider Keith Random Keller as a martyr of the faith. The second one that you all know something about is our beloved Martha Root, born in 1872 and passed away in Hawaii in 1939. She also was appointed hand of the cause right after her passing on October 2nd, 1939 by Shoghi Effendi. She was born in Ohio in a Baptist family. She was also a college graduate, and she was a teacher, and then she became a journalist in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, actually. And then she declared in 1909, she declared her faith in Baha'u'llah. And then from then on, she could not stop in writing articles about the faith, in getting things published about the faith, particularly after 1912, when she met Abdul Baha, when Abdul Baha came to US. And then she was so set on fire that she didn't even wait for the World War I to end. She said, I want to go traveling across the globe and teach the faith. She started traveling across the globe in 1915, and she traveled across the globe for almost 20 years, 4 times. And although they didn't pay her much, but she kept her job as a part-time job. As she went places, she would also write an article on where she was, what she was doing, something about the faith and all of that, would send it to Pittsburgh Gazette, and they would publish a lot of her articles. And they paid her a lot of money, very little, subsistence level, so that she could continue her travels across the globe. And so she published many articles and was able to translate some of the works, some of the Baha'i works, and then wrote some pamphlets in order to give it to these people that she met. And during her travels, she met some 400 prominent figures, including kings, queens, prime ministers, cabinet members from basically all countries of the globe. She could not stop. She had to go to all of them and tell them about the healing message of Baha'u'llah and his promise of world peace if they wake up, particularly according to Baha'u'llah, if they wake up and start the process of peace rather than continuing bloodshed and wars and animosity and division within countries and across the globe. As we all know, she finally met someone who had a more receptive ears, and that was Queen Marie of Romania, who loved the faith, who loved Martha Ruth, who did not want to let go of Martha Ruth. She kept asking her to come to the palace and talk to her about the Baha'i faith, and accepted the faith, wrote to Shoghi Effendi about her belief in the message of Baha'u'llah and in her renewed hope for humanity because of this sublime message and all of that. So toward the end of her life, she went to Hawaii, and she was still probably getting ready to go to another trip, and that's where she passed away. I'm still on time, I think, within the time limit.
No, you're
Another
good.
5 minutes that we
Yeah,
spend
25 more
on this.
minutes.
Okay. So at the end of each one of these episodes, let me stop and let's all reflect for 30 seconds and pause before we go to the next person. The third on our list that is the beginning of the individuals. Now we're talking about the female hands of the cause who were appointed hands of the cause during their lifetime. Well, Dorothy Beecher Baker. Dorothy Beecher Baker. And this beautiful lady was born toward the end of 1900s, 1898. And she passed away tragically. I'll tell you about that tragic, some of you may know, in 1954. She was among the first group of hands of the cause that were appointed while they were living by Shoghi Effendi. He started appointing hands of the cause in 1951, actually on December 24, 1951. She was among that first group. She was born in New Jersey. She was a liberal Christian. She met Abdul Baha in 1912. Her mother had already accepted the faith, so they went to visit Abdul Baha together. She was still a teenager. She was 14 years old when she had the privilege of meeting Abdul Baha. She continued her studies. From what I read, she was a Baha'i, but she did not really become a very active Baha'i early on until she finished her education and she became a teacher in a college. After college, she became a teacher. But then she became very active, and she was among the first members, of course, first female members of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of USA. And then from that time on, she became very active. She spoke, that's also unprecedented, in 140 colleges. She basically went across the US and took appointments in different colleges back then. You know, we're talking about 1920s and 1930s, and she would spoke about the faith. Probably 1930s and 1940s, primarily. And then she became also an active teacher, and not only in US, but she went to South America, she went to India. And then you probably know that the first series of intercontinental Baha'i conferences was by Shoghi Effendi, that was set up in 1953, beginning of the 10-year crusade, and Dorothy Baker was the appointed hand of the cause, assigned together with a couple of other hands of the cause to the huge conference in India, which was one of the first intercontinental conferences inaugurating the 10-year crusade. Now, then she went travel teaching with the Baha'is of India to some provinces in India. Then she went to Pakistan and met with their National Spiritual Assembly and talked to them about the vision and mission of Shoghi Effendi and the 10-year crusade. And then this took her almost a year. And then in early 1954, she was on her way back to the US when her plane crashed in Mediterranean Sea. And that's how tragically she passed away. Our beautiful Dorothy Beecher Baker. My father had the privilege of meeting her. She went to that conference in New Delhi in 1953 before she passed away. The next hand of the cause that I want to say a few words about actually is the first in this group of hands of the cause that I had the privilege of meeting when I was 18 years old, right after high school. My father sent me to the second series of intercontinental conferences, which was in Frankfurt, Germany. And this was right after the passing of Shoghi Effendi, just a few months after the passing of Shoghi Effendi. And Shoghi Effendi had this hand of the cause, Amelia Engelder Collins, we called her Amelia Collins, to be the appointed representative of Shoghi Effendi in the conference in Frankfurt. So she was born in 1873, passed away in 1962, probably a year before inauguration of beginning of the reign of Universal House Justice. And she was, like Dorothy Baker, among the first group of hand of the cause, personally appointed by Shoghi Effendi on December 24, 1951, by Shoghi Effendi. She was from Pennsylvania, and she came from a Lutheran family. She declared in 1919, and she was also among the first female members of the Hand of the Cause, like Dorothy Baker in the US. Now, there's a lot that I remember from beautiful Amelia Collins. But although all of them loved the Guardian, but from what I read about Amelia Collins, she felt sort of a devotion for Shoghi Effendi. As you know, Shoghi Effendi was very young. Shoghi Effendi was born in 1897, and he became Hand of the Cause. Excuse me, he became Guardian of the Faith in 1921. So he was 24 years old, and and Amelia Collins was, what is it, like 15 years older than Shoghi Effendi. So early in the guardianship of Shoghi Effendi, she went to Haifa, but in many ways like a mother. She wanted to protect Shoghi Effendi from all the darks, all those things that people within the faith and outside of the faith were doing, and wanted to protect Shoghi Effendi in any way and any shape that she could. She stayed with Shoghi Effendi for a number of months. She wanted to be close to him, to protect him, to love him, to nurture him. Back then in 1920s. And she was also among the first few Hand of the Cause, a female Hand of the Cause. So she was the third. Dorothy Baker became the Hand of the Cause. Amelia Collins became also a member of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of USA. But she was a member, in 1950, before she became Hand of the Cause, Shoghi Effendi appointed her as member of IBC. You know what IBC is? International Baha'i Council. Really, this was the predecessor to what? To our Universal House of Justice. In 1950, because Universal House of Justice members are selected by the Baha'is all across the globe, but Shoghi Effendi appointed 9 people as members of International Baha'i Council, asked them to come and live in Haifa, be close to him, and basically help him out with all the affairs of the faith across the globe. So she was among the first members who was appointed by Shoghi Effendi as to live in Haifa and be a member. In addition to that, a little later, next year, she was appointed as of the cause to assist Shoghi Effendi in all the affairs of the faith, as Shoghi Effendi considered. Although the amount of the money paid to the fund becomes secondary and depends on who is paying it and how rich or poor that person is, but we should remember that Amelia Collins was a huge benefactor to the cause. She paid a huge sum of money for building the House of Worship in Chicago, but more so, the soonest Shoghi Effendi announced that very soon we have to start the edifice of the Shrine of the Bab in Haifa, she could not hold back. And she paid a good chunk of her resources. She was a fairly rich person for building the Shrine of the Bab. And actually Shoghi Effendi wrote that she was the first major benefactor for building the Shrine of the Bab on Mount Carmel. And in her honor, and for all the things that she had done, Shoghi Effendi called, if some of you have gone on pilgrimage, you'll see a gate right in front of Baha'u'llah's shrine. And Shoghi Effendi called it Collins Gate. So when we need to, they open the Collins Gate before we go to the shrine of Baha'u'llah. This is how much Shoghi Effendi loved her. She loved all of them, but she was in a way like a mother to Shoghi Effendi, who protected the guardian and helped him to the last minute of his life and to the last minute of her life until she passed away in 1962 in Haifa, Israel. Amelia Engelder Collins, another beautiful female hand of the cause. I have not written a lot of notes on Corinne Knight True, but there's a lot to say about Corinne Knight True. Born in 1861 during the time of Baha'u'llah and passed away in 1961. She was appointed as hand of the cause on February 29th, 1952, among the second group of people who were honored to be hand of the cause. How old would she have been? The oldest ever hand of the cause appointed, 1952. She was 91 years old. She was 91 years old when Shoghi Effendi appointed that beautiful woman as hand of the cause. She was born in Kentucky. She was raised in a Presbyterian family. And she declared her faith in Baha'u'llah in 1899. You know, the faith came to US in 1894. And by the end of the century, we probably had 500-600 Baha'is. So she was among the first group of people who heard the message of the faith. And she became hand of the cause. Excuse me, and she was born in 1861, and she declared her faith in Baha'u'llah in 1899, which means she was, how old would she have been? She was almost 40 years old, 38 years old. She was a housewife. And gradually her husband and family became Baha'is. But here I have written something that I wanted not to forget and tell you about. In 1903, the first Baha'i temple ever was built. Where was that temple? In Ashgabat, in Turkmenistan, a province of Russia, eventually. Became part of Russia eventually by force. But you may know that the number of Baha'is late 1800s, probably a few years before passing of Baha'u'llah, ascension of Baha'u'llah, because of persecution of Baha'is, particularly from the province of Yazd, where we have a large number of martyrs are from that central city of Iran, Yazd. A number of them, including some of the closest relatives of the Bab, who were Afnan, who were Baha'is. They emigrated to Turkmenistan and settled in a city called Ashgabat. And then they asked Abu Baha, and they were given permission to build the first house of worship. So our first house of worship was built in Turkmenistan, in Ashgabat. And so the reason why I'm mentioning that is that in that edifice was completed around 1903. And this fairly new Baha'i, who was declared in 1899, wrote to Abdul Baha that, dear Abdul Baha, now that Baha'is of Ashgabat have a house of worship, is there a way that we Baha'is in the USA can start the process of building a house of worship? What did Abdul Baha respond? Wonderful, and you'll be in charge. So that lady, a housewife with I think 4 or 5 children, Abdul Baha says, you're in charge. Do something about it. And of course, guided her. And she, with like, I don't know, 500, 600, 700 Baha'is that were here, I don't know what percentage were active, send them individual letters, try to contact them. We have been given this blessing that we can also have our house of worship, and we need to raise money. So she wrote and wrote and wrote and traveled wherever she could, however she could, until by 1909, I think it was, that the Baha'is of USA had raised $20,000. And I think that money was enough to buy the land. So I don't know how the approval process was, but there was Wilmette Assembly or the Chicago Assembly, and we still didn't have National Spiritual Assembly. And of course, there was the guidance of Abdul Baha. So they bought the lot by Lake Michigan in Wilmette to build the first house of worship in USA. And her efforts were just beginning. Now we have the lot. Now we have to get money for the building. And who's going to be the architect? And how are we going to do it? And how can it be done? And when are we going to start? But she never gave up. They formed a committee. She was in charge of that committee. She was the first enthusiastic supporter of that committee all across the USA, and she kept her traveling and her writing and her pleading with the Baha'is of USA for years and years and years. And I think it was by late 1930s when there was enough funds for the National Assembly to have people together, the friends together, and say that it's time to start building in 1930s sometime. And so enough money was raised to start the process of building the house of worship. Of course, by 1953, the house of worship was completed. Ruhi Khanum was sent by Shoghi Effendi to be the representative for opening of our beautiful house of worship in Wilmette, Illinois, and Corinne Knight True, who was just appointed as hand of the cause by Shoghi Effendi, to be also there to speak about the process of how this thing began in 1903 and how it finally came to fruition in 1953. That's called patience, perseverance, faith, devotion, you name it. This lady, Corinne Knight True, had it. And she went on pilgrimage 1922, 1930, and her last pilgrimage 1952, when she became hand of the cause. And befittingly, She passed away in Wilmette, Illinois. Our beautiful hand of the cause, Corinne Knight True. The last from the group of 6 of the hands of the cause appointed by Shoghi Effendi, the 6 female hand of the cause, from the USA, Agnes Baldwin Alexander. Born in 1875, passed away in 1971, and she was among the last groups of, not the very last, but among the last hands of the cause who was appointed by Shoghi Effendi on March 27, 1957. She was born in Honolulu, and her family had gone there as Christian missionaries. She came across the message of Baha'u'llah in 1900, and that's when she declared her faith in 1900. And like many other prominent, amazing women of the faith from USA, from North America, particularly USA, she also started traveling. But particularly, she traveled to Southeast Asia, and she settled in Japan, and she lived in Japan for 23 years until Japan, from no Baha'is, they had the National Spiritual Assembly. And before forming the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Japan, as she kept traveling from Philippines to Korea, to Singapore and other southeastern region of Asia, they formed for a number of years. It was called the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Southeast Asia. The whole region had one National Spiritual Assembly. So after a lifetime of service, in 1967, she wanted to go back to her source and to Hawaii, and continued her efforts and the teaching and life in Hawaii. And she passed away in Hawaii in 1967. Another beautiful hand of the cause, Agnes Baldwin Alexander, female hand of the cause. What a blessing, what a privilege. 6 amazing female hand of the cause from USA. Keith Ransom Keller, Martha Root, Dorothy Beecher Baker, Amelia Engelder Collins, Corinne Knight True, Agnes Baldwin Alexander. What is amazing also, as we reflect on the life and legacy of these hands of the cause, is that most of them, as you see, all of them, were born in 1800s. And back then, starting during the life of Abdul Baha, they could not hold it to themselves anymore, or even to their city and to their state, or even their country. They rose and announced the message of the faith all across the globe. the prime example, as Shoghi Effendi calls it, the prime example of a Baha'i teacher, Martha Root, and of course the rest of them in their own way, as I've tried to explain briefly the best I could. But then, as I said, we had other hands of the cause who were from USA or from North America. One of them was Clara Dunn, that you may know something about. She was born in 1869, actually in England. But in her youth, I think probably around 1900s or so, she emigrated to USA. And later on, she met a fairly young fellow whose name was Henry Dunn. Actually, this is not her own last name, that's her husband's last name. Henry Dunn. And through him, she declared in 1907. She declared in 1907. And she also had the privilege of meeting Abdu'l Baha in 1912 in San Francisco. And then she also was among the first female hands of the cause who became member of NSA, but not NSA in here, but NSA in Australia. But anyway, to make the story short, no, I don't want to make it short. I have 3-4 minutes for Clara Dunn. In 1917, right toward the end of World War, she married Henry Dunn in 1914, 1915, around that time. And then in 1917, Abdu'l Baha has a series of tablets. I don't know when they got to US, but it was written toward the end of World War I, and probably 1917, 1918, it arrived in the US and was spread all across the US among the Baha'i friends. And those tablets, you all remember, are called Tablets of Divine Plan. Tablets of Divine Plan. This was really the first series of plan as to how to spread the faith all across the globe, formally, by Abdu'l Baha. If you haven't read those beautiful tablets, friends, read the Tablets of Divine Plans to further enthuse us as to that's what they did back then. What can I do now? So then, right after World War I, probably about around 1819, when Clara Dunn and Henry Dunn consulted about the plans of Abdu'l Baha, and that he wants us to travel to the farthest corners of the earth and spread the message of Baha'u'llah, they decided to go all the way from California to Australia as pioneers. And by that time, both of them were almost at the retirement age, 1920. So she was 50 years old, and I think he was probably 60 years old or so, or more than 60. So they traveled all the way to Australia. He was a salesman, and he was able to get a job. And Clara Dunn was a beautiful support for him, who was also a good speaker. And they had all kinds of meetings and firesides and gatherings in their homes until within a few years, they had their first local spiritual assembly of the Baha'is in Australia, in Sydney, I believe, yes. And then within a few years, that is within 14 years, they formed the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is, that it was first New Zealand and Australia together, and then separately. Shoghi Effendi appointed her as hand of the cause on February 29, 1952, as the second groups of hand of the cause. And her husband, who had already passed away, was already appointed as hand of the cause after he passed away. So this was the seventh. So she was in effect also from America, also from USA. She was born in England. She spent most of her adult life and Baha'i life in US, and she pioneered to Australia, and that's where she became a hand of the cause, as well as a member of National Spiritual Assembly, and also she passed away in 1960, before the formation of House of Justice in Australia. And last but not least, of course, is our beautiful, wonderful hand of the cause, Amatul Baha, Ruya Khanum, whose real name was Mary Sutherland Maxwell. I wrote May, it should be Mary. May was her mother's name. May Bowles was her mother's name. And she actually became Baha'i before the turn of the century in Paris, her mother. And she met she met Mr. Maxwell, Sutherland Maxwell. She met him in Paris. He was an architect while he was also in Paris. They married, but he was not the Baha'i yet. But and he kept saying that I believe in God, but I don't really want to be a part of any religion. But they went on pilgrimage together. To visit Abdul Baha. Abdul Baha was still a prisoner, 1908 or something, around that time. 1908, 1909, 1909. And there, they asked Abdul Baha if they would come with them to the shrines and pray with them. Because May Bowles was pregnant with the first child, and was it the only child? And they wanted Abdul Baha to give his blessings while they prayed at the shrines, and Abdul Baha did so. And that girl, Mary Maxwell, was born in 1910 in Montreal, as you know, Canada. And Abdul Baha in 1912 went to Canada, stayed with them, I believe for 3 or 4 days, and blessed that house. And that house is still preserved for humanity to go and see that place where Abdul Baha visited, where was the home of May Bowles and Sutherland Maxwell, who also became a hand of the cause in his own right, and the home where Ruya Khanum was born is still a Baha'i house that is blessed. Ruya Khanum went on pilgrimage a number of times with her parents And in 1937, and these are the dates when they went pilgrimage, 1923, 1926. And in 1937, the families and Shoghi Effendi decided that they want to get married. So in 1937, Mary Maxwell had the blessing of being the wife of our beloved guardian, Shoghi Effendi. Shoghi Effendi. And she was really the main assistant to Shoghi Effendi for years and years. And she became fluent in English, in French, in German, in Farsi, and attended many conferences as the representative of Shoghi Effendi. And as we know, after the passing of Shoghi Effendi in particular, she traveled all across the globe. She led many intercontinental conferences. I had the privilege of meeting her at least 4 times. In Haifa, in a conference in Palermo in Italy, in a conference in Monrovia in Africa, in her visit to New York in 1960, and probably elsewhere. At least these are the 4 times that I remember that I had the privilege of being. Oh, and of course, in 1892 when she came for inauguration of the most huge, the largest intercontinental conference in New York City. Some of you may have also gone to that conference in 1992, and that she attended, and she was the main speaker. You may know that that was the largest Baha'i conference ever, largest intercontinental Baha'i conference. Some 27,000 Baha'is attended from all across the globe. Most countries of the globe were there. This was an amazing conference. If you were there, it is unforgettable until the last day of our lives. And of course, in 1953, she was in Wilmette on behalf of Shoghi Effendi opening the House of Worship, and as well as she went to the opening of many other House of Worship on behalf of the Guardian and later Universal House of Justice. Sydney, Australia, 1961, Frankfurt, Germany, 1964, Panama, 1972, Samoa, 1984, New Delhi, 1986. You may know that she was also a poet, a writer, an author, that among her works is, of course, her memories of Shoghi Effendi. That who else but her could write that memorial in like 400 pages about Shoghi Effendi and her, what she did and what he did and how he collaborated with her. And she was also among the, I mentioned it here somewhere, of the first group of people, and handed the cause as well. She was appointed hand the cause on March 26, 1952, as the 3rd group of people who were appointed hand the cause. And she was also appointed as a member of International Baha'i Council, as I mentioned, was a predecessor to our House of Worship, to our House of Justice. And there were 9 people who assisted Shoghi Effendi while Shoghi Effendi was still on this earth. So these were our 8 prominent, most beautiful hands of the cause. Let me end with just a notation. You know, friends, if you invite me another 50 times, no, I won't have 50 more weeks to live, perhaps, but at least some of these people are among our prominent people that we should all know about. We had 18 letters of the living. One of them was a woman, Tahireh. We had 19 people who were considered apostles of Baha'u'llah. We have 20 people who were considered apostles of Abdul Baha. We had 50 people who were named Hand of the Cause by Baha'u'llah, Abu and Shoghi Effendi, as we mentioned earlier. And finally, presently, we have 92 counselors all across the globe who help guide the Baha'i community under the auspices of universal laws of justice. With this, I will close this and open up. I'm sorry that it took a little 5 minutes longer, I think. Let me open up for
Actually,
guiding.
we're going to have to actually close the program for today and end because it's 12:33, and generally the talks, even though yours started a little bit later, end at 12:15.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we end at 12:30.
No, we're done at 12:30. Lights out. But anyway, that was a marvelous presentation. There was just so much information. I was trying to write some of it down. That you gave some of the details that some of us may not know, even though we've heard the names of these wonderful hands of the cause. But we do have to go ahead and close. The only thing that we can do right now, we won't have time for questions and answers, unfortunately, we're just going to move forward and make our announcement, which is simply, Barbara, I don't know who you have for next week.
I will be sending that out Monday.
Okay, so you guys can look for an update as to who our presenter will be for next week. And don't forget about the food distribution program that's every Thursday from 10 a.m. until 1 p.m. at the Baha'i Unity Center in the parking lot there. And please spread the word to help combat food insecurity in the community. And if you're so inclined, if you're Baha'i, please consider contributing to our national fund and or also the local funds of the South DeKalb County community and the Sandy Springs, Georgia community. Many thanks to everybody who helped make this a great day today. Thank you to our presenter. Thank you to our readers and Barbara for keeping us moving along. Thank you so much. We hope to see you next week. Barbara, you have the prayer for the departed on your screen?
No, I don't.
Okay.
And thank you for your patience.
No problem. Thank you so much. Let's see here.
Allahu.
Allahu Akbar. We'll say the short prayer for the departed. Oh my God, O thou forgiver of sins, bestower of gifts, dispeller of afflictions. Verily, I beseech thee to forgive the sins of such as have abandoned the physical garment and have ascended to the spiritual world. O my Lord, purify them from trespasses, dispel their sorrows, and change their darkness into light. Cause them to enter the garden of happiness. Cleanse them with the most pure water, and grant them to behold thy splendors on the loftiest mount. Abdul Baha. Friends, it's been a pleasure. Until next time, stay safe and be well.